Good afternoon. We're going to get things underway. So my name is Diane Woff, and I'm director of the Philadelphia Writing Project. And on behalf of Phil Whip, a member of the Penn community for over 32 years, and a local site of the National Writing Project, the Reading, Writing, Literacy Program, and our partners listed on the agenda in your folder, GSE faculty, Africana Studies faculty, university-wide programs, including the Maku Black Cultural Center, the Teacher Institute of Philadelphia, the Penn Literacy Network, the Racial Empowerment Collaborative, and our community partners, the Philadelphia Public School Notebook, the Philly School Media Network, and the National Writing Project. We thank you for braving the snow, although it's pretty nice out today, for joining us this afternoon. And I'd also like to say a special thank you to the Campaign for Community for their support of this event. The Philadelphia Writing Project is especially honored to acknowledge the role that the National Writing Project has played in partnering with PBS and the American Creed filmmakers to design a youth publishing site to give students a chance to share their voices on the meaning of citizenship. And Christina Cantrill from the National Writing Project, who's here with us today, will say more about this opportunity at the end of the film. There is also information about this partnership on the back of the program and on the American Creed postcard in your folder. And on the left-hand side of the folder, you'll find information about Phil Whip and some of our upcoming events. So before I introduce our moderator for this afternoon, I'd like to introduce our special guest, City Councilman at Large David O., who has been a strong supporter of the Writing Project and our work with teachers and students across the city. Councilman O will say a few words about our gathering this afternoon and the importance of civic participation and civil discourse.
All right, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I will be leaving shortly. I apologize, but let me tell you why. I have to go to another event. It's part of my job as a city council person to try to get as many opportunities to interface and carry different ideas. And that's part of what we're doing, right? In other words, I come in front of you and then I leave and somebody says, oh my goodness, how disrespectful. That guy was here, it's all a photo op, he just ran out of here, what's he gonna do? Well, I have to go to a lot of places because it's a city of 1.5 million people. And in a city of 1.5 million people, there are a lot of very, very different ideas. And the issue that you're looking at today, civil discourse and civil participation, we have an upcoming election, right? And now more than ever, it appears that people are so unhappy with our democratic system, our political process, our political parties. And yet, thanks to our cell phones, there's more ways than ever to participate, to be heard. And at the same time, there's more ways than ever to be so very particular and close-minded. A tweet, that's all you need to know all the facts of the world anymore. And if it's a tweet you like, well, all the better. That's right. Oh my goodness, that's wrong. Those facts are false. Those facts are correct. And I think when we start dealing with the idea, is there an American creed? Should there even be an American creed? Do we need an American creed in order to have civil discourse? To start with this fact, that I respect you, that you have every right to your opinion, that you are a smart and intelligent person who've come to a conclusion that affects me, and it's important for me to understand who you are. And then I try to present to you that I've come to a part or a place where I've made a decision. Perhaps I won't be there for long, maybe I won't be there forever, but for right now, this is what I believe is the best for me, my family, my community, my city, and my nation. And as your representative, this is where I think I can represent the collective interests of everyone the best. How about those bike lanes, huh? Boy, don't even bring that up. And so we have a lot of very nice people, and here at Penn, a lot of very well-intentioned, well-educated people. But how intolerant can we be? And so what I'd like to say is, listen, it always starts with me. The problem is not them, the problem is me. Am I willing to listen? And I don't mean like pretend to listen and be polite, but my mind and my heart is closed. Am I willing to open up my heart and my mind to the nails on the chalkboard? Somebody's talking, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, that is completely 1,000% wrong. Or can I say to myself, okay, I really hate what they're saying, but let me try to understand beneath that, what are their fears, what are their concerns, what are their aspirations, and to what extent do I share a desire to see that they are happy and secure and successful in our community together. I think the beginning of civil discourse, which is important to a well-run democracy, begins with the idea that we respect each other and that we understand that we may not get our way, that we can be passionate about our ideas, that we may believe we're 100% right, but in a democracy, we may lose. And it's okay, because the greater thing is that democracy is working. Where are our values, however? Is it in the idea that all people are created equal? Is it in the idea that people have certain inalienable rights? Shall we live up to our creed and our beliefs, the founding of this nation, that those people are included, even though in our lifetime they have not been included? Can we look at ourselves and say, you know, what I believe and what I've espoused is in fact hypocritical when it applied well to these folks, but not to those folks? I'll confess, listen, I got a brother, he is like the Pharisees, boy. You cannot get a thing by him. He is so self-righteous, it's unbelievable. I love him to death. And there is not a thing that you can do that he will not point out and tell you why that's a sin and why it's a violation. But he loves Donald Trump. No aspersion to Mr. Trump, our president. However, I will say that it astounds me that whatever the president does, like with the porn stars and all that stuff, doesn't seem to faze him. Doesn't seem to faze him. I'm not sure why. It's a mystery to me. Okay, you like the president, you support the president. Do you need him to be perfect? What is the reason for that? And so, would I be upset? Would I not be upset? How would I deal with my brother and his children? Ivy League graduates, right? And so, do we just not talk about this subject? I'm a Republican, by the way. So, do we just not talk about the subject? Do we talk about the subject? How do we deal with each other? Because it's a thing where you begin to say, hey, I don't really understand you. I thought I did. But how can you espouse these values, live these values, and then it's like a mystery to me? The first thing I have to think to myself is, don't I do that too? How do I do the same thing? How is my brother looking at me and saying, wow, what a hypocrite? How do I look at myself and say, okay, maybe I need to take a couple of steps back and not be so judgmental of him, but look and say, okay, what is it that we agree on? What would we like to see done? And how, without me unproductively ending this conversation, how do we find a place where we can work together and build together? And how do we come to the point where maybe, listen, we're just not going to agree? There will be a winner and a loser. And when that is done, we shake hands, we break bread, and we move on to the next topic. Is that possible? I think, you know, the idea that we have to win every battle to win the war, that's certainly something that we may embrace. I'm getting the 2-minute mark. Very good. On the other hand, maybe winning the war is a matter of, fighting for each battle, but letting some of them go. for the greater good, for the long term. I think it is a matter of perspective. Certainly in my role in city council, I try to achieve certain things. I understand I'm not going to get them done. A lot of times they're not going to happen, but I do believe at the end of the day that I should try. And I will end with this. I believe that Moses did not part the Red Sea. I believe God parted the Red Sea. But he had to lift up his hands and extend his arms, and then maybe God would part the Red Sea. For me, I do the best I can as a council person. I try to understand people's perspectives. I try to be honest with them. I'll tell them where I disagree. I take my votes, and then in 4 years, they can vote for me or vote against me. I think that's fine. I think that's the democratic process. In that process, you, the voter, you, the citizen, have to understand the issues, the realities of how things get done, what happens when we don't talk to each other, what happens when we do, and who are you electing? And who you elect, as in our gerrymandered society that we've dealt with, we will end up with people that will communicate or will not, will compromise for the greater good or will not. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman O, for getting the conversation started. As a proud alumnus of Penn, I'm really pleased our community is supporting this teach-in. And now I would like to introduce our moderator, my friend and reading, writing, literacy colleague, and the 2017 president of the American Educational Research Association, Vivian Gaston.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thank you, Councilman. I will say I am not a Republican. Get that just going. But I want to just, even in this very brief introduction, because you're not here to see me, you're here to see the film, I want to say what an extraordinary person Diane Roth is, and what incredible creativity and knowledge she has brought to our division and to our school and to the university. The Philadelphia Writing Project is a phenomenal institution within our school and within the city, as is the National Writing Project. Very supportive and very involved in this film. So I wanted to acknowledge that before we get started. So I am personally delighted and honored to be here today and to have this opportunity to moderate the discussion that will ensue. We're going to watch the telecast version, which I had the pleasure of watching for today. And there are many compelling and thought-provoking dimensions of this film. And we'll leave it up to you to tell us what you think of the film. Afterwards, we're going to ask you to do just a little exercise where you talk to each other about your initial responses, and then we'll have a general discussion about the ways in which there are cross-cutting issues, what issues seem to stand out, what issues have personal significance. In the film, you will hear people give their personal narratives, and you can think about your own narrative. What would your narrative be in relationship to the narratives that are presented in this film? So thank you again for asking me, and I hope you will enjoy the screening of the film.
Okay, Mike Mannix. And there's a note taker in your folder if you want to do any jotting.
We have about 45 minutes, and we want to use that time to kind of extend some of the issues that were discussed in this film. And we would like for you to spend the next few minutes responding. Each person should have one of these sheets in your folder. And it says, what is your American creed? And maybe simply respond to that. Jot down some.
I'm sorry.
Jot down.
Figured it out.
Figure it out, all definitely aware. Jot down any items that come to mind, the ways in which you may have identified or not with the various narratives that were presented. And then we'd like for you to choose to talk to the person next to you, choosing one of these questions, those 4 questions, to discuss. It's up to you to choose whichever question you'd like. And then we'll give you about 10 minutes in total for this little exercise. I would ask that if you are sitting next to someone whom you have talked to in the past 24 hours, Philadelphia Writing Project founding director Susan Lytle and Torch, you too, not so much, move to someone else whom you may know less well or whom you have not spoken to in the past 24 hours. And let's use this as an opportunity to really engage in a dynamic conversation about these issues in a moment when the very issues around democracy and the democratic process and democratic ideals and democratic education are being talked about and are being challenged. So we'll give you about 10 minutes in total, and then we'll come back for a more general discussion. Okay.
You already answered this.
So there are those 5 questions that are here. One refers to how does our, well, I kind of changed this a little, but how does our diversity in America shape our American creed? How do words, symbols, or rituals express the American creed? How does your family and community history connect to your American creed? And last, which is always my favorite, is how can you express your American creed through action? Because at the end of the day, that's what we hope you will be motivated to walk away from this space and engage in. So, what did you say? What was your response? What are some of your American creeds? What was your general kind of response to the film, and what did you identify with or not identify with in those commentaries? Yes.
I identified with, I'm Peggy.
Hi.
I identified with Condoleezza Rice's, I think it was her grandfather, who was
Yes.
sharecropper. My mom and dad were both sharecroppers. I was born in the South. So my mom and dad believed that, there were no excuses. So you worked hard, you benefited from working hard, and if you slipped a little bit, you got back up and you did what you had to do. So I was the first out of 5 to graduate from college, and my mom and dad ended up my mom was a geriatric nurse, my dad was a truck driver for the Postal Service, so they didn't let the fact that, they had no education for the most part, because they were the oldest out of 13 on both sides, so they had to work. So that's the cloth that I come from.
That's what I actually identify a lot with Condoleezza. Who knew? Very similar backgrounds, fathers, priest. But it was kind of interesting. I want to agree with you because it was kind of interesting. I thought, 8 years in the Bush administration, never knew this about her, and I actually know her cousin very well. But it's also kind of statement to the ways in which the ability to uncover the different dimensions of who people are can allow us to engage in conversation. Thank you so much for sharing that. Others?
Yeah, we talked about, Reed, Sam Reed.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Now I can see you.
and so we just talked about the complication of the American creed.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I think we came to a conclusion that it's aspirational, like without the aspiration, which kind of connects with Peggy's, without the aspiration, it falls apart, right?
Well, that's the point that they make, right? It's an aspirational country. I mean, that's.
But the aspiration is an illusion as well. So it's really, that's why it's super complicated, because it's really illusion, and sometimes when you see that it's an illusion, you may give up, but instinctively it still keeps you your eye on the prize in a sense, even when the prize isn't there.
David Kennedy, I think, said, "Promise is not a guarantee." And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, I thought about the importance of stories, personal stories, and how people say, Yeah, you gotta talk to those people who put our president in. And I don't know how to do that, but really stories, personal stories, could be a way in.
I think that's one really salient point
Yeah.
that came through here.
Hi, Frank Murphy. I saw the uncut version, and we've had kind of a common conversation. What was cut out to get into the 60-minute version was a segment
That's right.
where they brought together the co-founder of Move On, and they brought the co-founder of the Tea Party, and in bringing them together, they discovered in the process, they had lots of hesitation about coming together. They discovered that they could have respectful conversations with one another, although their ideologies were much different, because they recognized that they had a lot of things in common as far as their creed. I think it's sort of like implied in the shorter version that you see Condoleezza Rice, who's representing one particular point of view,
Right.
and Kennedy on the other. But it's sort of like really subtly up to you to figure out that you're presenting people from very different points of view, and that you can find common ground in conversation because of your American creed. And I just throw that in there because I thought that was like a really, really anchored the whole thing, although at 84 minutes it's much longer than 60 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
but it makes a lot more sense in the longer version.
Yeah, because if you're, 15 and looking at that film, you have a very different response to it than those of us who are a little over 15. But I think thank you. That's very good. There are two people here.
Dr. Marangela Beggs. I was actually very worried that this film is airing on PBS in this era. I'm a social justice educator. I was really worried about sort of the folksy quality of it without a real scholarly understanding of all the things that have made the United States a very complicated and very unequal place. And so when I think about my own narrative, because that's part of what we're asked to do, I'm African American. My family's from the South. We're also Native American. I was born in 1969, and I guess, using the sort of frameworks of this film, I would say that I'm a first generation American. The civil rights movement paved a way for me, and I can see that as a structural historical change, not ever rooted in the sort of ideal of America from the beginning, that there were actual historical events and social movements that made it possible for me, even though my people have been here since the beginning of this, to say that I'm a first generation American. So I was just really worried about the kind of, I felt that it really reiterated a lot of the myths of meritocracy, the myths that race is something that we're not really going to talk about, that class isn't something we're just going to touch on class. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm worried about this being out in the mainstream.
Yeah, I think, that's other people's comments. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I want to dovetail on what she's saying because I wonder if the American creed is a myth. I mean, these are some of the things that are in my mind. And also the erosion of any American creed that may have existed at some time in the past. And as I was watching this, I'm asking myself questions about, at one point in my history, early, education was the key with an exclamation point. Now education is the key with a question mark, because it does not really allow you the same access as it did in the past. So in viewing this, I'm wondering if the demise, if you will, of some of the things that we've known, like the demise of the America of in God we trust. Some of the anchors of the American creed really don't have the same hold on a younger generation of Americans. And so what I saw in viewing this film, like whereas we saw diversity, well, where is inclusion? And they're not necessarily the same thing. And when we talk about equity and equality, they're not necessarily the same thing. And so I'm just wondering if this American Creed film perpetuates something that may not really exist anymore.
Very well said. I think there's always this question of whether there's a kumbaya moment at the end of these things or whether it actually motivates people to challenge even more. And in my world, it should probably be that we continue to challenge the status quo. And we're constantly interrogating, what may appear to be the obvious, but as you know, not necessarily the obvious. Right? So hand in the back over.
So my name's Sydney Morris, and just a couple things that bothered me a little bit is the statement that
You have a very soft voice, so you want to stand up just so you can project.
I can just speak louder.
Okay, and then there'll be the other choice. Okay.
So the statement that we are a country of immigrants is false. We're not a country of immigrants. We're a country that has immigrants. We are not a country of immigrants that does not include me, that does not include the Native American people who were here and whose, populations were just decimated. So that was something that bothered me. I also think that, my parents, I guess, kind of embodied the American dream. Like my dad came from Jamaica when he was 4, lived in the projects, ended up growing up and being really successful. My mom lived in the projects, whatever, but they were smart, they got great educations, and they ended up being successful, and that's great. But I also really acknowledge that their situation is so rare, and they also had things, even though they had really tough upbringings, they were both really naturally smart. They had people who saw things in them. They tested well and gotten into some of these great schools that allowed them to have an easier time achieving the American dream than some other people. So I just feel like the problem with the American dream is that it's not a level playing field for everyone by any means. And education can help, but it doesn't solve the problem. So I just feel like there are so many privileges there that can help people attain the American dream, and even if they're not super obvious, like with my parents, they still had privileges, even if they were small, that allowed them to do that, and other people not.
Great. Closer to 15 than many of us. Good examples, great.
Hi, Torch Schleibel. And I'm just hearing the comments of a couple of people who have already spoken, but the whole time I was watching this, I was thinking of Sean Reardon, demographer at Stanford, whose research indicates that family income predicts almost perfectly access to higher education, and that has been true since 1975. Up until 1975, the converse was true. The education system actually did a reasonable job at creating equal opportunity, but that is out the window now. So the question people seem to be wrestling with in the film is, how is this confrontational enough in a sense?
That's great. Those of you who don't know Sean's work, it would be an interesting piece to read. Also, another piece that just came out is a work by Raj Chetty, and it was described, I think it might have been in the Times, on the inequity even among upper middle class Black men as compared to white men. And I think Raj says something that's kind of interesting. Talk about people who grew up in ethnically diverse neighborhoods, and he says, of course, there's really not that much of that in America. And I thought that was a very timely point. Others, I think these are excellent points.
I might add something again about the critique,
Say your name.
sorry, Hazami Sayed. My thoughts around hearing the military perspective kind of was really a bit jarring, and I wish I just didn't sit there so much kind of uncountered in some way, because for me as well, being a naturalized citizen 24 years ago, and then being here when 9/11 happened, and then seeing what American military has done in the Middle East, and having grown up and lived there, it's very disturbing, and it gives me. I have a very sort of knee-jerk reaction to that kind of sort of patriotism that's still unqualified when you see what the military has done. So it's a tough thing, especially not being born and raised here. So, but yeah, feeling this is home for me. This is home. This is where our boys were born, and we plan to live here.
And terrific boys she has. I know those boys.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it didn't need to be the elephant in the room because it took actually a pretty large segment of this film. But really being able to address that because what does it mean to sit in this room and hear that? Someone.
I'm Corey from Southwest Philly, and American Creed it to me seemed somewhat stereotypical. It grabbed a lot of stereotypical people and told stereotypical stories. I would have been interested in seeing. So my grandparents were in the Army, I believe it was, and their perspective. And when I went up to Vermont for education, for studying in college, and I met people who was in the military, it varied totally different of their perspective. And growing up, there was always this saying that my dad and a lot of the people on my dad's side was saying is, it wasn't necessarily the education that they were looking for. They was looking for money because money they believed was going to give them the freedom to do whatever they wanted. Yes, they would be given a lot of slack and stuff because they were black in a white country. But money was more powerful than the education because everybody wanted it. And a lot of people still do want it. And I think throughout my life, my family has told me that the American creed, the way you show it is to have money because money gives you power and power is influence. So I didn't really this idea didn't sit well with me because it's an aspiration. And that's slightly true, but I think it's more about money and having a good, stable situation than anything else.
You know, the title of the film is American Creed, and the question of what is your American creed allows you to frame it in any way. And some of that, and it should actually be different for everyone here. And it's not, we don't have to have affinity with, the perspectives of the people here. I think some American creeds are going to be and should be extraordinarily angry. And some of the creeds will be anger with kind of muted dimensions of the creed. Some of them will be nirvana, right? Some of them will be creeds where people have had just a wonderful experience and simply don't know and have never really experienced, have never even known people who have experienced hardship or discrimination. But we're all kind of figuring out, and I think what this should motivate, whether you like the film or didn't like the film, should be to kind of ask questions, what is my American creed and where does it come from? I was struck by, I think, the comment earlier about the ways in which it's changed over time and what appears to be kind of lost and what's been gained. I have friends who said they felt like they were American when Barack Obama was elected. And for the first time, the flag meant something to them. So there are these different ways, but at a minimum, we have the opportunity to, as I said earlier, to interrogate the ideas here and to work for change. Everything that we do, every opportunity, we are sitting here in a space of incredible elitism. And so we are uniquely positioned by the very fact that we knew to come to this Van Pelt Library today, to this film, to do something different. And I think if, at its best, it should motivate us, I hope, to think about who we are within the spaces, that we inhabit, and what other spaces might we inhabit. What does it mean for a child to say, you can be whomever you think of yourself to be, or something like that. And so we built an intergenerational legacy that's not just about who we are in this particular moment, but the ways in which we kind of frame an America for generations to come, so that a Hazami doesn't sit in a room and with all of the accoutrements of a, an active and citizen in this country, and then feel alienated or uncomfortable with what is going on in a film. So how do we create this space? It seems to me that it's imperative for all of us to take that on, to walk from this place and, at a minimum, think about the ways in which we can change and we can affect some change and act in a way that actually makes an American creed something that people can embrace for not just today, but for years and generations to come. So I want to thank all of you for those comments, and for those of you who didn't comment, I hope that it will motivate you to take some of these issues with you, whether it's in your classrooms or whether it's with your family and friends and people in your communities and neighborhoods. I want to just make a few announcements before we leave, and Christina Cantrell will also come up. One is, if you are interested in extending this conversation, we are inviting you to join a book discussion group. It will be led by Doctors Jason Javier Watson and Kelsey Jones on James Foreman Jr.'s Locking Up, you didn't look too closely, Locking Up Our Own Crime and Punishment in Black America, and that will be on May 3rd at 4:30. And there will be free books available for the first 20 people who sign up. And then there will be the National Writing Project's youth publishing site. And I'm going to introduce Christina. And Jill will talk briefly about that.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming today, and to Vivian for facilitating and Diane for hosting. We appreciate it. I want to pull up the National Writing Project is a network of educators across the country. We come together around writing and the teaching of writing with really the goal to support all youth in having the opportunity to communicate, share, express themselves with the tools of today that aren't launching. Let's try another one. Oh, okay, it's a double click, sorry. And so we are so American Creed, I just want to pull up the AmericanCreed.org website for a second. So American Creed put out this film, and then their intention is really to sort of launch and they're actively working on a public engagement campaign around this to exactly invoke these kind of conversations about the film and the stories. The partners, we've been working with them and a set of partners to really surface what youth are talking about and thinking about in relation to these same questions that we just explored together in this room, and for youth to actually have the opportunity to really think about these things together. There's other partners in this mix, including Facing History and ourselves and PBS Learning Media. So through these different websites, there are many different resources, curriculum that have been put together about this work. And then I wanted to just show you the Writing Our Future American Creed site that the National Writing Project is currently hosting. So this is a site where we are inviting educators to bring this film or these conversations to their classroom and support their kids in really exploring some key questions that emerge out of this film. The questions are the same ones that you looked at today, so we're asking youth to really write about what is your American Creed. How does your family and community history connect to your American Creed? What do the words, symbols, or rituals express the American Creed? How do diverse Americans understand the American Creed? And how can you express your American Creed through action? And we're encouraging youth to really respond in a variety of ways, from really doing research into these issues, interviewing others, bringing their family histories and surfacing that to share across the country. Currently, we have sites. So sites could be are usually schools. They could be libraries. They could be a book group. I know there's a book group here. So so these are sites where groups of youth are coming together to share and talk about this work, and then to write in response and to share their things that are sparked by this film. So we have about 100 so far responses posted. You'll see they range from they include multimedia. This one, just to give a shout out to Sam, I think Sam's kids connected with youth that were in Montana and Michigan and what was, I think, Montana and Michigan at least, right?
Yeah, and Utah.
In Utah. And one of the youth interviewed the other kids over a youth cast and then published the youth cast as part of her response to this film. Really powerful piece of writing and sharing that the kids did. Do you want to say something about it?
No, the city, suburban, city, rural discussion was really interesting. Yeah, that was cool.
So there are sort of more sort of expository essays that you might. Here's a letter to Secretary DeVos. How does education connect to the American dream? Really, the kids are really taking on these issues and looking at the current conversations that are happening around the country. You can hit Surprise Me and you'll see multimedia work that the kids are working on and playing with different ways to respond and think about this work. You can find out how to participate or sign up to learn more about it. I also want to bring you to the resources. So we've been working with educators across the country to really think about how do you have these conversations? And what are the important pieces of historical and the context that's needed for them? I mean, these are really deep and complicated conversations. So we are, over time, putting together resources from our classrooms. So these are teachers around the country who are sharing the ways that they're helping to frame and develop these conversations in their classrooms. And then they share examples of student work and lesson plans and different activity sets and resource links and readings to support this work. I also want to say that they kept popping up the different, the PBS link, and there are lots of different stories that you can watch. So a lot of youth have been sort of exploring also, different clips in the film and, not watching the whole film, but sort of exploring different pieces of it together. We also have lots of related readings, and I could imagine even a more open sort of syllabus that we start to connect, that add more and more readings as we go and start to develop this work out. This project, American Creed, is available for screening from the PBS website to classrooms and public spaces for the next, I think, about 3 years. And we plan to keep this site open so that folks can connect to it over time and start to think about how these conversations can be supported in their classroom and how youth can publish their work here.
Great, thanks so much.
Yeah.
That was
Thank you.
terrific. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
That was. Thanks so much. So just in closing, I want to thank you again for being here. You are invited to email reflections to philwip@gsc.upenn.edu. That's philwip@gsc.upenn.edu. I want to say that these opportunities for us to engage in the kind of discussion and exchange of ideas are rare and are treasured moments, and we want to really thank you for taking the time to join us today and to really kind of put your own experiences out here in the public sphere. I tell my students and my kids who've been in my class before that there's a lot of work to be done in the world, and we have the opportunity to walk out of this space and engage some of that work. So we wish you a lovely rest of your day and weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
believe we ended exactly
I know, I
at
know.